On to our broadcast today. These are our top stories.
We are 9 years into the competency-based curriculum CBC, and several public learning institutions continue to report major deficiencies in access to quality education. Also, understanding the role of cybersecurity in insurance amidst this digital age. The mental overlook. How refugees and war survivors are left to tend to their mental wounds after chaos subsides. Lastly, echoes of previous post-election violence still evident across the nation. The fuel? We find out more shortly. Live from Jibonge Newsroom, I am Kezia Njeri, and welcome our viewers in Kenya and around the world. We are with you for the next 25 minutes. Thanks for joining us. This is On the Spot Newsreel. You can join the conversation on our social media handles: Facebook, that's On The Spot, Twitter @On The Spot, and the hashtag is On The Spot On The Go. Now on to our first story of the day. The gap between several learning institutions is seemingly getting wider by the day, especially after the introduction of the competence-based curriculum, CBC. A new education report from Usawa Agenda and Zizi Afrique show just how wide the divide is among schools, facing challenges largely on infrastructure and human resource, with the students taking the bigger blow. We dive into the source of some of the differences, with Jibonge TV's Elizabeth Knight having the latest.
In sub-county schools, and sub-county secondary schools educate majority of the children in the country, up to 65%. Those schools, most of them lack the most basic facilities. They don't have libraries, they don't have laboratories. Many of them lack even classrooms. Children are eating under trees, they don't even have a dining hall, and you can imagine what happens on a rainy day.
Following a report of the state of education in Kenya, red flags within the system have emerged and are alarming despite the millions of shillings yearly allocated to the sector by the government. The reality of the ground remains grim, revealing an overstretched system having a teacher deficit of 100,000 across the education ladder from early childhood to technical institutions. This is linked to the underperformance of most government learning institutions. According to the report, junior secondary schools and senior secondary schools have the biggest deficit. Only 80,378 have been posted to junior schools against the optimal of 88,899 teachers. And in the senior school, only 124,569 against the optimal of 188,440.
The amount of workload in most public schools is very high. As you all know, there is a teacher shortage in Kenya. And you know, the fewer the teachers, the more the workload. So in a week, the maximum lessons should be maybe 45. So if you give a teacher 42, it means that this teacher only has 3 free lessons in the entire week, making them not have enough time for maybe marking the learners' work and giving them immediate feedback, as compared to a private school whereby you find the workload is as low as 22, maybe up to 28.
0, very good. Can you clap for him for me? For me, you are the best.
The key challenge is learning material. Another challenge is space for the learners, classrooms. They don't have enough classrooms. And then their feeding program. We only depend on the parents who are very, very poor to support their feeding program, which is not enough. So sometimes they even go to, they stay in school without lunch, and of which it cannot be able for them to learn.
These issues aren't isolated, they are fueling divide between the rich and the poor. In urban centers, schools might boast modern labs and enough staffs, but in rural or slum areas, infrastructure failures like broken desks or internet access forces students to drop out or fall behind.
In private schools, the teacher-student ratio is 1 to around 28 or let's say 30. When you look at public schools, the ratio could be 1 to 80 or even 100.
The experts warn if this continues, cycles of poverty as undereducated youth struggle to compete in a global economy. The government has promised reforms, but advocates say more funding and community involvement are needed to bridge the gap. We'll continue to follow this story. Back to you in the studio.
And now our correspondent Elizabeth Knight joins us live. Knight, do you think the Kenyan government will actually be able to remedy this gap that they somewhat created with the sort of distribution they do to these public schools in time to save face? What do you think? Can they even save face?
Nope, at least not without a struggle. What they did is dig up a hole right in their backyard, forgetting that with the lights off, no matter how many times they walk the same yard, they couldn't possibly see the hole.
And the children are going to pay for it.
And the children are going to pay for it. But so are the teachers, Njeri. It's a double-edged sword.
So I want to point out that we only have less than 5 months left before the transition of the grade 9 students, and yet education officials dismiss the claims of the report saying that the allocations are accurate and that the government funds are well distributed. Yet we still have ghost schools receiving millions year in, year out. It seems like a self-made crisis, but very worrying.
Indeed, Njeri. It's actually more scary because there is a lack of clarity on how the institution responsible for the tracking and having schools in their system can tell us about the ghost schools. Yet in real ones, students don't even have classes or toilets. Makes me question its transparency and its open bias. Honestly, most urban areas do not have the so-called ghost schools, and there is almost no complaint about them. But in the rural areas, it's where they are hit the most.
So just thinking out loud here, does it mean that some teachers have themselves posted in these schools and striking over an imaginary 2.9 billion?
Come to think about it, that could be possible. There's an urgent need to streamline the system as soon as possible.
Knight, thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate it. We'll continue to watch this and hope that the recent reports sparks a shift to something.
Thanks, Njeri. Hopefully.
Now, we can't really get into the meat of it without going into the ground where the facts lie. We want to see so far how all these are affecting the quality of education the students are receiving, and how do we go about it, even with all the delays in payment to the teachers, and of course, not forgetting the ghost schools. With me is Cecilia Moremi, the HOD Mathematics in Jonathan Glog. Thank you so much for being with us. So, tell us, how is it really going on the ground in terms of the infrastructure and the structures of schools?
Okay, when I look at private schools, most of them have a lot of facility. They have good fields, they have balls, they have the nets and so on. They have good classrooms. They have a lot of facility that is needed, including good labs. They have good libraries where the learners are able to access a lot of information. So I feel private schools have an upper hand as compared to public schools, where the classes are very congested and the facilities are not enough. When you look at the textbooks, you find maybe we have one textbook being shared among maybe 8 learners, meaning that those learners are more disadvantaged compared to those in private schools. So looking at CBC being a curriculum that requires a lot of material, public schools look more disadvantaged as compared to private schools.
So how about the teacher-student ratio? Is it really enough teachers per students in each class?
In private schools, the teacher-student ratio is 1 to around 28 or let's say 30. When you look at public schools, the ratio could be 1 to 80 or even 100. And you know that ratio affects a lot. It affects the discipline of a school. It affects even the content delivery, because the more the students you have, the less the contact you have with each of them. So when you have a smaller student-teacher ratio, it works better than where we have a bigger ratio, advantaging the private schools and disadvantaging the public schools.
The differences in public and private schools are black and white. How is the quality of education being impacted by all these? Is there hope for those not in urban areas, specifically private schools?
They affect them in this way. The more the learners, the less contact you have with each of them. I take an example. If I have a class of 28 learners, I am able to have a feel of each of them. I can give a question, go around confirming if each of them has attempted. But if I have maybe 100 learners, within the 35 minutes which are available, I can only maybe get to 10 children. Meaning, most of the others are disadvantaged, especially the weak learners. They may tend to just do nothing, knowing that there is no follow-up from the teacher.
And finally, do you think this country is ready to embrace the CBC system in its entirety? And are the students drawing away from science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which is STEM, disadvantaged?
There is a very big difference between 844 and CBC system, in that in 844 system, the teacher was the carrier of all the knowledge, and it was mostly teacher-centered. While in CBC, the teacher is just a facilitator. They just encourage the learners. They just start from what the children know, and then learning start from there. So it is the learner learning. It is more of learning than just the teaching. In 844, we really emphasized on the examination. By the end of the course, who scores maybe 400 out of 500, and we felt like they were the brightest. But in CBC, it is beyond the score. It is beyond the final examination, what you score. Now we have the assessments, whereby we don't have the full marks coming from the final assessment. We have like 60% coming from the final, 20% from the CBS, that is what the SBS, that is what they do in school. Then you also have a 20% from what they did in KIPSEA. Meaning what? In case a child was disadvantaged in one, it doesn't conclude that this child is stupid. No. But they're given room. It is not like in 844 where they concentrated on a single exam. In CBC, they really encourage on competencies. We don't dismiss a child because they did not score 100 in maths and we assume that they are stupid. No. So we consider the competencies. There is that one who is very good at music. We appreciate them for that. There is that one who is very good at maybe playing football. We appreciate them for that. It doesn't mean there is no work. Work has to be done. Work has to be done in both the systems.
Well, thank you for indulging me in this rather hefty and insightful conversation. Before we move on to our next story, you can join the conversation on our social media handles. That's Facebook On The Spot, Twitter @On The Spot, and the hashtag is On The Spot On The Go. It has now emerged that over 2.5 billion cyber attacks targeting various systems in the country were carried out between January and March this year. The shocking details are contained in the Cyber Shujaa report of 2025, which further reveals a dangerous shortage of trained experts to defend the country's systems. In today's digital age where businesses rely on technology for their operations, the significance of cyber risk insurance has never been greater. Our correspondent Michelle Macau has more details.
Many Kenyans across the country are feeling the bitter punch of digitalization with the rise of cybercrime on their personal lives, as well as their businesses with information, data, and sensitive material up for grabs by hackers. Some have opted to seek refuge through cyber insurance covers, while others resort to go back to the analog era to avoid being victims of these attacks.
We have things like cyber espionage, where companies steal data from each other for competitive purposes. That has to be dealt with, and that is covered in the bill. We have incidences of international espionages where countries steal data from each other. That is a very critical issue. We now have an issue to do with the critical information infrastructure systems, which refers to those systems which are very critical to a nation, that if they went down, there will be huge economic loss, or there will be harm to people or to the economy. For example, nuclear plants, they must be protected. You can imagine if one hacked into a nuclear plant, what will happen? In Kenya, for example, if you hacked into KRA database, so what will happen? If you hacked into aircraft control systems, you can imagine what will happen. It will lead to death. Those are issues which are covered in this bill. So they are much bigger issues.
With the rising number of online security threats, the requirement for advanced solutions is growing exceptionally. The obsolete network security solutions are not proficient in securing enterprises.
Something has to be done, and that something is what we are now discussing now, having in place a legal mechanism through the cybercrime bill.
Other than the insurance companies providing a solution to help Kenyans and business owners be more prepared, financial institutions have also risen to the urgent need to offer their clients ways on how to be well protected, as well as offer assurance on the safety of their personal data.
In view of all this, financial entities have seen the need to offer similar products to their clientele by offering cybersecurity insurance through schemes such as CyberGuard and CyberEdge Insurance, which are designed to protect businesses from financial and operational impacts of cyber incidents. All this emphasizing on how important it is to fill in the gap on all sectors. Michelle Macau, Jibonge TV, Nairobi.
Insurance covers almost everything, including cyber risks. And today we get to understand a bit more on the role of insurance amidst this digital age. So I think it's safe to say most of Kenyans do not understand what cyber risk insurance is. Point us into the right direction.
Thank you so much. My understanding is that technology is an enabler and still evolving. And the customers that we are currently having are very dynamic customers with various needs that are current, and some of them are actually emerging. So one area that has come on to support that aspect of value proposition is basically aspects of using a technology to support those needs. And one of them is actually issues as you bring in some aspects of value addition and enabling environment, there are also risks that come on board. And one of the risks that is actually coming on with the technology is actually cybersecurity. One area that has been policies that needs to be looked at, although there are some that are already being proposed, are related to issues with protection of personal data and information around the individuals.
So the banks are joining the equation. Is it the same thing, better or worse in terms of credibility?
The capacity of the individual insurance companies to run with that technical expectations to manage and manage those risks is also a concern, because the Data Protection Act came the other day. Some companies do not even have the data protection officers, though it's a requirement. And even those who are calling themselves to be data protection officers might not be having the capacity to run and manage those risks. that's also another key area. Third thing is the capacity building. I refer to it as the emerging challenges that are coming on board. Technology is evolving very fast. So most companies do not have the capacity to run up to maintain that task of running at the same pace at which the securities are coming on board. Especially issues to do with fraud, which is a concern for most of insurance companies. You find that fraud actually makes the bigger percentage of the cost related to the cost of insurance in the country. So that aspect of fraud is becoming a challenge because those fraudsters keep on improving their skills in terms of accessing this data and even coming in to affect the data integrity issues that are being held by the companies.
Much appreciated. Well, that takes us to our first commercial break, but when we get back, the path towards mental restoration amidst humanitarian crisis in Kenya.
Nafurahia undugu na uko wetu, nasherekea kazi na bidii yetu, tuvute pamoja, tushirikiane, bega kwa bega tujikaze, tusaidiane. Niko na uwezo wa kujiendeleza, niko nayo nguvu, nitajitahidi, niko na fanaka, nitajitolea, niko na baraka, niko na kazi nayofanya.
Welcome back, viewers. For those joining us, my name is Kezia Njeri, and you are tuned into Jibonge TV. This is On The Spot Newsreel. You can join the conversation on our social media handles, that is Facebook On The Spot, Twitter @On The Spot, and the hashtag is On The Spot On The Go. Over the years, survivors of conflict and war areas have most of their basic needs met with the help of USAID and other supporting agencies that come to their help. But they are left to fend and care for their mental health even when they do not understand how to define their issues in the right words. Our correspondent Wesley Ndarathi has more details.
There are currently 27 armed conflicts occurring worldwide. 2.3 million of children have been killed, injured, orphaned, or displaced due to modern warfare, which heavily impacts civilian populations. Consequently, individuals exposed to armed conflict are 3 times as likely to develop post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD, anxiety disorders, or major depressions, and women and children demonstrate increased vulnerabilities to these outcomes. Epidemiological research has indicated that as many as 227 million adult war survivors may experience PTSD.
I didn't know what I was going through. I've faced a lot of stigma and discrimination because most people around me didn't understand what I was going through.
These risks are heightened on older people and marginalized groups. Stressful events such as violence and loss, as well as poverty, discrimination, overcrowding, food and resource insecurity are common in emergencies and can increase the risk of developing mental health conditions. However, while emergencies have a detrimental effect on mental health, they also have been shown to provide opportunities to build sustainable mental health care systems in the period following an event. There is still hope at the end of this dark tunnel. Reporting for Jibonge TV, Wesley Ndarathi, Nairobi.
The neglect of the war and conflict survivors will in the long run cause more harm than good, not only just to them, but the people of the next generation. And that means our future is also at risk. With me is a mental health specialist. Thank you for joining us. So the big question is mental health a humanitarian emergency? That's a conversation not tapped into, especially in the places that mental health care is a need and not necessity. How can all this be worked out?
Within the human emergencies, I mean, as you've said, the situation is wanting because most of the time there's stigma, there's discrimination, and then we look at mental health and psychosocial support as an alternative.
The mental assistance we are talking about is more of a luxury, or rather viewed as, because these services are very expensive to source. What is the practicality of getting these same services to the people who need it the most?
And we are creating community-owned structures. So if, I'll give you an example. In Zimbabwe, there's this grandmother benches. So it's just grandmothers who sit, and the community normally goes to the grandmothers. So it was identified after there was someone who had unfortunately died through suicide. How do we ensure that the support is easily accessible to everyone? So what they did, they realized that we have a network of grandmothers who just sit at benches. How do we empower the grandmothers? So for us, we also have something similar. Our community structures are, you'd find the chief, mzee wa nyumba kumi, just the normal chama lady, any ordinary person, and we try to constantly empower them on mental health and how to offer, if it's psychological first aid, how do you do at that particular time? Empowering them with basic counseling skills so that they're able to respond to that. Now, when there's no funding, it would mean that the resource is still within the community, even if we step away.
Indeed, thank you for that thoughtful conversation. On to our next developing story. Here in Kenya, we have our national elections after every 5 years. And from 2007, there has been an outbreak of violence, mostly driven by presidential results, not appealing to the parties involved, or ethnically driven chaos, as to which ethnicity carries the big shot seats in the government. Our correspondent Ezra Odayambo filed the following report.
Since independence, Kenya has had a difficult road to democratic consolidation, and the coalition government currently in power is fragile and stalemated on range of key reforms. The 2007-2008 post-election violence played out largely on ethnic lines, and ethnicity continues to play an inordinated role in Kenyan political life. Ethnic-based violence has long history in the country, fueled by grievances over land, privilege, and inequality. The election of leaders by the people is the aim of democratic procedures. An electoral system is intended to ensure that the outcomes reflect the people's choice, providing credibility to the elect and ensuring the results are unchallenged in any form. Will Kenya in the coming 2027 election choose leaders who will lead the country down to a peaceful path, serene, or will history repeat itself? Ezra Odayambo, Jibonge TV, Nairobi.
We have come to the end of our broadcast for today. Remember to keep commenting and tagging us on social media. I have been your host, Kezia Jerry. Until next time, keep safe.